I'm Diana Ideus, Master Certified Coach with Hawthorne Union, and this video is part of our new coach training talking about a deeper dive into the coach model, which is how we recommend that coaches structure their coaching sessions to be in alignment with the International Coaching Federation, or ICF. So there is an overview of our coach model that Jason and I via video have shared. There's also more information about why we created new coach training. If you haven't already started there, you may want to start there. If you want to dive in even deeper, there's more depth about the PCC markers and your ICF exams, both on Hawthorne Union's YouTube channel, as well as the website and our resource page. But for this particular video, we'll be looking at why we chose these elements and how they're grounded in the ICF core competencies, which is how coaches are expected to be, as well as the PCC markers, which is how coaches are evaluated, the evidence that the ICF assessors look for on coach exams. So first and foremost, for a session in alignment with the International Coaching Federation is that clarify, that handing the microphone to the client, what would they like to focus on? You don't have to phrase it this way. You can use your own phrasing, but essentially you're handing the microphone over. You're not making suggestions. You're not recommending the topic. You may have to do this in your practice, but for a session in alignment with the International Coaching Federation, your client is responsible for bringing that topic to the table. So establishes and maintains agreements. Again, you don't need to know that this is core competency 3.6 and PCC marker 3.1. But at the same time, if you're at the point in your coaching where hitting the core competencies or taking a look at the PCC markers and looking for that additional depth and self-assessing yourself on kind of where you're developing, what you're missing, things like that may be helpful. So we've included the references here. So first and foremost, in order to go out the gate successful in alignment with the ICF, that client needs to come to the session with a sense of the topic. After they have a sense of the topic, what would they like to take away? Another way to think about this is, what are their success measures? It's okay if they don't know. It's actually quite normal that they don't know. But as a coach in alignment with the International Coaching Federation, you are supposed to ask and hold the space to help them start to define that and reconfirm. Doing this at the beginning of the session is better than just kind of wandering around. You're trying to follow their lead because they're supposed to be in the driver's seat. They're trying to follow your lead. And so it can, human emotions are complex and messy enough, even if you know where you're going. So asking this at the beginning of the session, I want to talk about time management. Okay, what would you like to take away? I want to talk about finances. I want to talk about career change. There's a million things they could take away. There's a million directions that those could go. So asking the client and finding out what they want to take away is important to help organize the session right at the beginning. So from a core competency perspective, we're expected to do this. So not only identify and define the topic, but define and reconfirm the measures of success. And then also, you can't really manage the time and focus of the session if you don't know where the client is heading. You can always ask to say, you mentioned XYZ. It seems like we're going this way, but here's the thing, you're not going to have that frame of reference if you haven't first gotten a sense of where they want to go. And your PCC marker on that is going to be 3.2, where you're expected to identify or reconfirm what they want to accomplish. Now, the thing with the core competencies and the PCC markers, you don't have to do all of them. They're not supposed to be a checklist. The core competencies look at embodiment, the PCC markers look at behavior. However, if you don't have 3.1, what do they want to focus on? And 3.2, what do they want to take away, or how are they measuring success from the session? It is unlikely that that session is going to be in alignment with the ICF, and it's unlikely that that's going to pass. So don't pass go without a sense of 3.1 and 3.2, because actually so many of the PCC markers route back to 3.2. So, moving the client, asking questions that help the client get towards the outcome they desire. If you don't take the time to figure out what is their desired outcome before you kind of leave the gates, so to speak, you're not setting yourself up from success from an ICF perspective. And as you can see, these can be one-liner, really simple questions, but know as well that if the client is emoting and processing, and there's a lot of information, and it's not really clear what they want to take away, that you are going to be expected to reconfirm. So you can either reconfirm with something like, well, it sounds like, or what I'm hearing from you, or to clarify, success from this session would be XYZ. You can do it with a straight confirmation of what they said, or your understanding of what they said, or you can head into articulate. And articulate is looking at, what does it mean? So, for example, I want to talk about a career transition. What would you like to take away from this time? I'd like to have a better plan of what I should do over the next month. What would change for you if you had a better plan of what to do over the next month? Well, I'd have more confidence and I wouldn't be so depressed at work. Boom, things just got deep. They got deep fast. Now we have to be careful with things like depression and things like that. But the point is that it just got way deeper, and you're only probably what, 2 minutes in, maybe 3 minutes in. You could take more time to establish the agreement, but at the same time, it just got real. And so asking these questions about meaning before you go off to the gates, because sometimes they'll be like, people will, especially on the ACC level, call it blood in the water. They're like, oh, what's our topic? Oh, okay, let's talk about that thing. And then they just dive right in without looking at like, what makes this important? What is going to change for you if we get those success measures that you articulated? Sometimes what'll happen is the client will actually change topic right at the beginning, because they'll be like, actually, you know what? That's not the most important use of our time. The most important use of our time is XYZ. It's better to front load those at the beginning to get that sense at the beginning and help make sure that we're supporting the client to move from their current state to the desired state. So lots here. So asking this type of question to have the client articulate the value or the meaning helps us have a deeper understanding. It means that we have to create space for silence, pause, and reflection. Silence is one of the most underutilized coaching skills. It's all over the PCC markers. There are so many reasons. You know, I wrote a book about it. Listen, mentor coaching for coaches. So don't underestimate the silence as a coaching tool. PCC marker 3.3 really changed my coaching. It evolved me from a PCC into an MCC. So asking that, what would it be like if, or what would it change for you? It allows you to kind of fast forward. So what are we talking about? What do you want to take away? If you had that thing, what would change? All of a sudden, instead of waiting till the end of the session, you have that at the beginning, and you can drop down deeper with your client, which also helps us act in response to what the ICF calls whole person, because the ICF doesn't want you just focusing on the topic. So if they really want time management and they want to plan on how to better time block their schedule, okay, so that's a very tactical goal. What's that going to give them? A better quality of life, more confidence? Does it actually reveal that they are insecure and they have imposter syndrome? What's happening with the human underneath the topic? It doesn't mean the topic's not important, but if we address and can support the human, then it addresses multiple topics. So the kind of articulation of the meaning and where we're headed is important, and also looking at how is this going to be kind of a holistic, high tides raise all ships kind of thing for this person. We also use this to evoke awareness. So we do want to, as coaches in alignment with the International Coaching Federation, we're not going back to the past. We're not getting a bunch of context because we're trying to solve it like consultants. We're looking at, how do we ask questions to help client explore beyond current thinking? So the client already knows they're thinking in the present. So what you want to do with your questions is to be looking at up and out. So if the client brings up the past or something challenging or something like that, we can honor the client. We can reflect that back. It sounds like there's a lot there for you. It sounds like this is a topic that's really meaningful for you. As you think about where you want to go in this session, what's going to be most helpful? So we've acknowledged the thing, but then we're moving up and out towards that desired state. So coaching oversimplified is current state to desired state. It's that path there. So in the PCC markers, you get points for these, you get credit for these. You don't have to do all of them, but thinking about that whole person, you're asking about the who in 7.2. You're asking about the what, and then exploring towards the outcome the client desires. Now, if you didn't do 3.2 and identify the outcome, you can't actually do 7.4 because that hasn't been articulated. So the ICF is going to expect you to do that. Now, it's not too late if you realize you're lost in a coaching session and you're starting to articulate, you're starting to advance towards them, and you're like, wait, I don't really know where we're going. That's okay. You just ask the client, hey, we're covering a lot of ground here. Clarify for me what you want to make sure you take away, right? It's no big deal. If you're a little bit lost, they might be a little bit lost too. That's all right. But as the coach, it's our responsibility to be always keeping sight on that future outcome and evoking awareness about the future outcome. So these steps, the COA of coach, I recommend you front load this in the beginning and you get this value in this meeting, because then as you move into the C, you can be off to the races and really work with the client to dig in more. It doesn't have to be at the beginning. That's just what I recommend. So as we look at create, this is where we dig more into the topic. What does success look like, not just for the session, but with whatever they brought to the table? What's a step they can take? Sometimes people get bent out of shape about the first step, so a step can be helpful. Do you want to look at obstacles? What might get in their way? What support do they need? What will they commit to? This is a lot of the coaching. You've set the foundation with figuring out, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to take away? What's going to change for you if you take away that thing? Then in create, you have some time to explore. Now it's co-creating. You're doing this in partnership. You'll see with the language as we look at the competencies and the markers, there's a lot of coach invites, coach partners. If you're getting ready to take your exam, your multiple choice exam for your credential, that language invites partners is going to come up on your exam as well. That's really how we're expected to be and embody on the ICF level. So in this kind of maintaining that coaching presence and evoking awareness for the client, we're demonstrating that curiosity, comfortable working in a space of not knowing. If you come from a consulting background, a leadership background, this is potentially harder for you. If you're coaching a lot of executives who maybe didn't sign up for more kind of ICF style coaching and are expecting more of a coach consulting hybrid, this sometimes can be challenging. But from an ICF perspective, we're expected to be comfortable in that space of not knowing. The idea for the ICF is that the client has the answer, not the coach. So the coach needs to be comfortable in that space. So we're also inviting the client to generate ideas. It's not about us and all the things we think and all the recommendations we have. Sometimes they call PCCs the virtuoso. When you think about a consultant, consultants are getting paid to offer those ideas. Managers get paid to have those answers. From a coaching space, we are inviting the client to step forward. And then the markers, again, it's those markers that we've already looked at in Articulate. So we're looking at, okay, about and beyond the client's current situation. We're asking about that whole person. And again, we're moving towards that outcome. So looking at, as you're exploring something, it can be easy to want a bunch of contextual details. You do not need that context. The client already has that context. You want to be looking towards the future. So maintain that coaching presence and be looking at how is where they are now, what do they need to move forward. Going deeper on that, you continue with how are you going to partner with them to transform that into action? So promoting that client autonomy, it's not about you saying, "Oh, I think you should do XYZ," right? It's what ideas do you have? What steps could you take? What support do you need? And then again, that PCC marker, coach invites and partners. So take a look. If you're not familiar with the PCC markers and you're getting ready for your exams, I do recommend that you take a look at them. You, again, don't have to hit all of them, but there's different ways to invite and partner. Are you asking about support? Are you asking about barriers? Are you asking about accountability? Are you celebrating the client? There's a lot of ways to look at that. And I personally find the core competency language a little bit more esoteric. My brain is more aligned with the PCC markers. And so that is an easier set of language to me, but they're both in here and there's resources everywhere about the core competencies and the PCC markers. So you can take a look at that. So create that path forward, but then we need to wrap it up. We need to tie those bows. So reflecting observations back to the client and making space for the response. So your role as the coach is not just to ask questions, it's to say what you see, but you have to do so with what the ICF calls without attachment. So you can share things. It sounds like there's some emotion there. You've mentioned the word X a number of times. Your tone changes when we talk about XYZ. So reflecting those observations back, sharing our own intuition or observations, but not being attached. If you're like, oh, the client really needs to do this. I have 30 years of experience in this, and the client, that's not coaching. That's not coaching in alignment with the ICF. So check yourself before you wreck yourself in your session. And also, but do share your thoughts and observations. This was a hard one for me because it took me a while to nuance, so I wasn't taking over the session on accident and I was making enough space for the client without muzzling my own kind of intuition and observations. So, great way to do this is to ask questions. What have they learned about their situation? What have they learned about themselves? So remember, when we looked at the PCC markers, you get points for the whole person. You also get points for talking about the topic. So not that it's all about points, but at the same time, in addition to embodying the way that we want people to coach in alignment with the International Coaching Federation, this is also an exam that you're going to get assessed on. So I think it is important to realize like what your assessors are looking for. They're looking for you to not just advance the client and their topic, but how you're supporting the person. And a general question, what are you taking away from this session? I like my questions nice and broad because you can always narrow down your questions after that. So, how are we remaining focused, observant, empathetic, and responsive? Focus on what the client is and is not saying to fully understand what's being communicated in the context. So this is a bunch of core competencies together, but at the same time, this is a deep listening. This is a deep listening and observation. This is something that distinguishes coaches from other modalities because of the way that we're really carefully listening to what's happening with the client. So taking a look at the detail on that, if you're not as familiar with these kind of listens actively, can be helpful. Allowing again for silence, pause, or reflection. If we're making a reflection or an observation, you've got to give your client some time to translate, and it should be customized. My questions are usually pretty generic. So these questions, what have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about your situation? I ask very general questions all the time. However, there are going to be times where, you mentioned so and so is really important. Is that something we need to explore as you think about what you want to take away from this session? The word space keeps coming up for you. Your language change, just how we reflect back because we're listening so carefully. A lot of times coaches are in their head about asking the perfect question or saying the perfect thing. And then your head's so loud that you're not actually listening to your client. If you listen to your client, they're going to give you the words and the metaphor and the body language that you can then ask about. So, evoking awareness, again, observations, feeling, and insight, there's without attachment. We're offering that up with the client. On the PCC markers, you need to determine if you want to invite them. If you're just going off and kind of, giving a seminar or a summary, that's not necessarily what we're looking for. It's about sharing something to see if it lands with the client and or asking them, does that resonate? Does that land? Or offering for them, you might want to try this on, or it sounds to me like this, but what's coming up for you? Because we always want to make space for the client because we're not the expert. And then on the PCC marker side, again, those questions about the current and desired state. Again, the sharing with no attachments, and see that part invites the client's exploration. So if you share without attachment, but don't invite the client, you're not going to get PCC marker 7.5. That's okay. You don't have to get all of them. But here's the thing. If you're going to share, you want to share and invite. Same kind of thing with summarizing. A lot of coaches over summarize. It's a way that we've been taught to actively listen. But if you look at the PCC markers, summarizing doesn't, you don't get any points for summarizing unless you're actually summarizing because the client needs you to summarize. So you don't have to get all into the nitty gritty of the language, but as a mentor coach and as an assessor, this is what I do to prepare coaches. So just be mindful, share, but also share and invite. And then as we move to close, so I call facilitates clients growth the closing markers. These don't have to happen at the end, but it's usually cleaner when you've set up the stage for the topic, you've talked about the topic and they have some ideas. And then it's facilitating client growth. You're kind of closing it down at the end. But again, these can go anywhere, but it's ultimately, so what? Now what? You've talked about these things. How are they going to apply that? What has changed for them? What are they going to do? So, they may have great awareness. It's okay if they don't necessarily have action items. They can stay in a place of awareness, but looking at from a core competency perspective and also a PCC marker perspective, how are they going to apply it? How are they going to apply that learning about themselves as well as about their topic or situation? So hopefully this was a helpful deep dive, a little bit deeper into the coach model. If it sends you back to the core competencies and the PCC markers, that's good. That's part of the intent. Though ultimately in your coaching sessions, especially as you go and move towards your exam, you've worked with your mentors, you've taken your training programs. At a certain point, you need to kind of put all of this aside and just be present with your client and see what comes up. But we hope that this coach model can guide you through the way and are wishing you success as you work with your clients and you develop your practice as a coach and as you head out towards your credential path. Thanks so much.